Bailey Curry will go full-time with JD Motorsports in 2022. Brandon Brown has full season sponsorship for 2022. Jimmie Johnson will run all 4 Michelin endurance races in IMSA in 2022. And Josh Bilicki might be the favorite to go to 77 Spire Motorsports car for the 2022 season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with one paint scheme, as we're going to take a look at Ben Rose's 2022 Bombardier and third paint scheme that we're going to see likely in 2022. This paint scheme looks pretty decent in my opinion. One thing I've noticed with ThorSport especially is they've kind of used this new look where they've used the gray look, and honestly I've kind of liked it. I've seen what they've done with the 98 car at points with it, and I've also seen what they've done with the 13 car at points as well with the gray look. So I think it looks pretty decent in my opinion, and I'm really looking forward to see it out on the racetrack. Hopefully this will give him good luck, and good luck to him in 2022. And I think the paint scheme will hopefully give him good luck in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story, as we're unfortunately going to turn this episode into a little bit of a sour. Now, as unfortunately, a couple people in the racing industry, in NASCAR, unfortunately, in the world of Outlaws, unfortunately passed away this past weekend. First person that unfortunately passed away is Martha Earnhardt. Martha Earnhardt was basically the matriarch of the Earnhardt family. She was the mother of Dale Earnhardt Sr. and the grandmother of Dale Earnhardt Jr. and other people in the Earnhardt family as well. So my prayers and condolences do go out to the Earnhardt family at this time. She will basically get to join Danny Earnhardt up in heaven, and she passed away at the age of 91, which again, it's really sad to see the mama Earnhardt unfortunately passed away this weekend. Like I said, my prayers and condolences do go out to the Earnhardt family at this time. The next person that unfortunately passed away this weekend was Hill Overton. Hill Overton had a racing show in the Virginia area, I think on WIXC in Virginia, for over 50 years, talked about all forms of racing, whether that is NASCAR and other forms of racing like dirt and USAC and all that stuff. He talked about that for many years, and unfortunately he passed away this past weekend. I don't know how old he was, but it's really sad to see that unfortunately he passed away this weekend. And like I said, my prayers and condolences do go out to his family at this time as well. And the final person we're going to talk about is Bobby Marshall. Bobby Marshall, unfortunately, he passed away. He was one of the OGs of the World of Outlaws. Was one of the people that helped the World of Outlaws get to have really its big boom. World of Outlaws started, I think, in the 1970s, and he was there to race in like the 1980s and stuff at the beginning. He never won a sprint car race, but he did win some preliminary events, and so it's really sad to see, unfortunately, one of the OGs and one of the people that really helped on pioneers of the World of Outlaws. It's really unfortunate to see that he passed away. My prayers and condolences do go out to his family at this time as well. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Fly Inform Structures. As Fly Inform Structures is going to be sponsoring Jeremy Clements in 2022 for 3 races. I do believe that Fly Inform Structures actually did sponsor Jeremy Clements last year in 2021, so it's really cool to see that Fly Inform Structures is coming back to sponsor Jeremy Clements in 2022. I do believe that Jeremy Clements does have full sponsorship for 2022, so it's good to see that another company is coming in next year, and they're willing to sponsor Jeremy Clements in 2022, at least through 3 races. Hopefully it gives good luck. I think I've seen the paint scheme too. I think it looks pretty excellent. Really happy to see that Fly Inform Structures is going to be back 2022. Very excited about that for sure. And like I said, good luck to him, because I think he's going to need it. It's going to be tough competition next year, and good luck to him heading into 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As Kyle Larson now officially has a YouTube channel, and just yesterday, he uploaded his first video from the parade on Elk Grove, California on my brother's birthday on November 22nd. Really cool to see that another NASCAR driver has a YouTube channel. I think one thing that's really important in regards to that is what this is going to do is this is going to basically potentially gain more basically attraction on social media. I think one thing that drivers have not been able to do is really put themselves out there on social media. Of course, you have some that have it. I think Eric Almirola has a YouTube page. I think Kyle Busch has a YouTube page. We know that Haley Deegan has a YouTube page. But it's really cool to see that especially some of the younger drivers, they're embracing social media a little bit more, and they're getting a social media page. And I think you should go subscribe so we can get that channel blowing up a little bit more. And I'm really glad to see that he's getting a social media, because I've been talking about this for a while. Drivers need to be engaging on social media. And the fact that Kyle Larson now has a YouTube channel, I think it's really excellent, really solid. And like I said, I'm very happy to see that he officially has finally gotten up a YouTube channel. I think it's great overall for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Nashville Fairgrounds. Now, there is a little bit of update in regards to the Nashville Fairgrounds and the potential of the approval of the deal. It was reported by Bob Pockers yesterday that the nominees to fill the 2 vacant Nashville Fair Board positions are on agenda for the Metro Council as its January 4th meeting. The mayor's office said it won't present the Bristol Speedway Motorsports final proposal for the Fairgrounds track until the vacant seats are filled. For those of you who have been paying attention to Nashville Fairgrounds story, we've been talking about this for a very, very long time. About a month ago, there was a major announcement in regards that they were likely going to basically, if it does get approved, that there's going to be a 30-year agreement and that they are hopefully, if it does get approved here very, very soon, that they can have racing as early as 2024. The plan is to renovate Nashville Fairgrounds, put basically like a major like sound barrier on the top of the track, like a big like wall, basically for create basically like a sound barrier around the track, and basically renovate this basic track with 30,000 potential seats. There has been a lot of people in the area of the Nashville that have been very, very vocal and outspoken against the racetrack, which I don't really understand why you're outspoken against it. The racetrack's been there since 1903. I get the frustration, but the track has been there for over 115 years, almost 118, 119 years. It's been there way longer than you. No, 1904, so 117, 118 years. Regardless how many years, it's been there a lot longer than a lot of people, so we really never understood the backlash, but it's going to get approved most likely. The Fair Board has basically been, I think, 3-1, I believe. I think that right now, if it stays at consensus, right now, I think that we're in really, really good shape. But if it does get approved, Nashville Fairgrounds has a really strong shot of coming back. So that's an update in regards to the Nashville Fairgrounds. I'm just happy to see that we at least have some sort of update in regards to that, and hopefully sooner or later they can just say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and approve it. So I think it's frustrating that people don't really know what's going on. That hopefully we will find out soon in regards to sponsorship. Well, not sponsorship, in regards to that soon. Hopefully it gets approved here very, very shortly. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Andrew Merstein. As Andrew Merstein is facing an SEC complaint. According to reports, it says that he illegally engaged in 2 schemes in an effort to reverse the company's plummeting stock prices. For those who don't know, he is the owner of Medallion Financial. And Medallion Financial was the owner of, you guessed it, Richard Petty Motorsports. We kind of wonder what was going on, why Richard Petty Motorsports basically got sold, and it became basically Richard Petty our Richard Petty GMS Motorsports, something like that. I don't remember how the name goes, but something like that. But basically, the team is now like our RPM GMS Motorsports, Richard Petty GMS Motorsports, something like that. But basically, what ended up really happening was, and makes a lot more sense now, what happened in regards to that. Because number one, this is illegal stuff. You can't really overall do this, and now we got in a lot of trouble, and it's probably going to be facing prison for a very, very long time. Because when you have an SEC complaint, you can go to jail for this. So it definitely is interesting that this happened overall. It's a crazy story, too, because we were wondering why all this whole stuff happened with Richard Petty Motorsports, why they sold the GMS Racing, and the more you look at it, it makes a lot more sense basically what happens. So it's crazy, interesting story, and hopefully he does get arrested for it, because honestly, you can't do this stuff, you can't legally do this stuff, and he's probably going to get arrested for it, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Atlanta tire test coming up here next week. It was reported by Bob Poggers that there's going to be an Atlanta tire testing Tuesday and Thursday next week in regards to the horsepower for the next-gen car. It'll be closed to media except for an hour Thursday for video and photos from select locations. And also likely there are going to be no fans are going to be allowed in the test as well. And most likely there's going to be no live streams for these tests as well. Tuesday is going to be the Xfinity and trucks for that. Teams are going to be determined at this time. And then Wednesday and Thursday is going to be Ross Chastain for the Chevys, Chris Buescher for the Fords, and Kurt Busch for the Toyotas in regards to that next-gen test. The reason they're doing a tire test is because, remember, Atlanta Motor Speedway got reconfigured, and we do not know what the horsepower is going to be for the next-gen test for this car. So they're bringing next-gen cars there. Most likely what this is going to end up being, the horsepower, is it's going to be 510 horsepower for the Cup Series, and what they're determining is if it's going to be a super speed race or if it's going to be a normal race. However, many people in the industry basically think that it is likely going to be a super speedway package for the Cup Series and most likely for the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series as well. That's why they're having the tire test coming up really, really soon. And the fact that they're not having media in the center, I'm very surprised they're not allowing fans and the media in there. And I'm very surprised that they're not having more cars come out and test. Just have some sort of racing, how the racing is going to look. I thought maybe they could do that. But at the same time, it is what it is. Maybe we'll get some sort of form racing between the three and see how it is. But again, there's 2 little cars to really determine how the racing is going to be. So I wish that they would have brought more cars out to that test. I think only having 3 cars there is a little bit of a lack in my opinion, but it is what it is, and that's the news in regards to the Atlanta tire test, and we'll probably know what the packages for all 3 respective series are going to be when we go to Atlanta, because I believe that's the 4th or 5th race of the season for the Cup Series. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th for the trucks, and it's 5th or 6th for the Cup Race Series. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th for the trucks, and for the Xfinity Series, it's like the 5th or 6th race as well. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but we'll find out what those packages are really, really soon. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Jeff Gordon. As Jeff Gordon is going to be the Grand Marshal for the 2022 Chili Bowl Nationals. It was first reported by Wikipedia on NASCAR, basically Twitter, and I also reported that as well on Twitter as well, that he's going to be the Grand Marshal for the 2022 Chili Bowl Nationals. First of all, I think it's really, really awesome because it's basically taking Jeff Gordon back to his roots. Before Jeff Gordon became one of the greatest NASCAR drivers, arguably probably the greatest driver ever, you can make an argument for that, Jeff Gordon really came from the world of USAC racing and also dirt racing as well. So he kind of understands this kind of racing overall. So I think it's really cool to see that they're bringing a legend of motorsports who also is now working Hendrick Motorsports, by the way, who won't be a commentator for Fox anymore, who's going to be working Hendrick Motorsports as the second in command, basically vice president and basically the second in command right now, the chairman basically at the company. It's really cool to see that Jeff Gordon is coming back to his roots and he's going to be at the 2022 Chili Bowl Nationals. Maybe at some point he can come back and race. Who knows at this point, but I think it's really cool to see that Jeff Gordon is going to be the Grand Marshal for the 2022 Chili Bowl Nationals. A lot of people definitely are going to check that out for sure, and to see that Jeff Gordon, a legend. And one thing I will talk about in a second with the next story we'll get into in a minute, but I think it's really cool to see that we're having a NASCAR crossover right now, another motorsports crossing over. I think it's cool to see that Jeff Gordon, though, is coming back to be the Grand Marshal for the Chili Bowl Nationals. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch has been this past weekend, along with multiple drivers like Sheldon Creed and Brad Moffitt and Christabel. He has been competing in the Tulsa Shootout. Now, keep in mind, this is the first time that Kyle Busch has ever gotten into a heat midget. He's competing in 4 classes. I think a non-wing event, I think a wing event. I think there's 4 types of classes he is currently competing in. Well, in his first heat that he ran yesterday, Kyle Busch went from 8th to 1st and ended up winning the heat. Now, later in the day, Kyle Busch did not have as much unfortunate luck in that. Unfortunately, he didn't have as much fortunate luck in that, but he did end up having a lot of fun. He seemed like he was having a ton of fun. Then there was this post-race interview on Flow Racing where basically he kind of cussed, but let's be for real, who really cares? Anyone should be allowed to do that. I don't think NASCAR should find anybody. I don't think any motorsport should find anybody for basically saying some cuss words. It's just a cuss word, for Christ's sake. But anyway, Kyle Busch is having a lot of fun with it. And one thing that first of all, the fact that Kyle Busch got up to speed that quickly and won his heat race, very, very impressive. Very few drivers can get into a car that they've never been in before and can come in there and basically say, I'm going to win the race. And he was able to do that. Like I said, very few drivers can do that. And that is something that is very, very impressive. And not very many people have that trait to do that unless you're Kyle Busch or Kyle Larson. There's not many drivers that can do that. The only driver, like I said, that I've seen in the last few years that can get into a car and instantly be successful is Kyle Larson. Kyle Busch is just proven why he's one of the greatest drivers in probably the world of motorsports ever. He is just insane. And it doesn't matter what car he gets into. He can contend right from the get-go. And another thing I want to talk about for a second is, as I just mentioned a minute ago, I love the crossover of drivers coming over to other motorsports and having fun with it. That's one thing that I've missed that used to be a thing back in the early days of motorsports, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even in the early 80s. But you haven't seen it much until recently, the last couple of years. And it really started a few years ago with the motorsports crossover, and the fans are basically getting involved with it as well with the motorsports crossover. But we've seen it for many years. We've seen drivers go over to Rolex. We've seen drivers compete in dirt races. We've seen it for other motorsports come over and check out NASCAR. I mean, look at dirt too. You've had some guys from dirt come over and run some NASCAR events. We see some NASCAR drivers run IndyCar events. We see some IndyCar guys come over to NASCAR. I think that crossover is something really, really important for the future of motorsports. And the fact that we're continuing to see that, I think one is only impressive, but I think it's going to be great long-term for the sport. So I'm overall very, very happy that Kyle Busch is continuing to compete in this event. I think it's really, really awesome. And hopefully Kyle Busch can do more of these events. And someone get him a Chili Bowl ride, please, because I'd like to see Kyle Busch run the Chili Bowl in 2022. Hopefully that happens for him next year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Bassett Racing. As it basically was confirmed in a photo that Bassett Racing is for sure going to be returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022, at least for Daytona in 2022, with the number 77 car. And it looks like Ronnie Bassett Jr. is going to be the driver of the 77 car for Bassett Racing in 2022. For those who want a little bit of a backstory, Bassett Racing actually was supposed to run the full season in 2021, but unfortunately, they were only able to, I think, make one race in 2022, or a couple races in 2022, and that was at the Circuit of the Americas when they had to get a Cup Series driver to run that event to make sure they were able to make it the event. Because unfortunately, what happened last year was we had the metric system, and unfortunately, qualifying got rained out. And unfortunately, Jordan Anderson Racing Team was affected by this as well. So with press qualifying coming back next year, it's good to see that Bassett Racing is going to be there. And I believe they're going to also have RCR backing equipment as well for this team next year. So it's really going to help their team that they're going to have a chance to go and actually race more than just one race. Because like I said, unfortunately, they were only able to run, I think, 1 or 2 races in 2022. I think they failed to qualify, I think, for the Charlotte race, but they were able to make it for the next race, the race before that at Circuit of the Americas. So I'm really happy to see that Bassett Racing is making their return. They're just going to have to make it into the show. Again, the Xfinity Series competition is really, really tough. There are almost 40 to 50 cars, potentially 50 cars that could be coming to Daytona for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. The field is stacked for Xfinity. We've got like 40 confirmed entries for Xfinity already, and there's a lot more that potentially could be announced down the road. So really happy to see that Bassett Racing is making a return next year in 2022, and I'm glad to see that they are coming back next year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Parker Kligerman. As someone had asked in regards to what Parker Kligerman's plans are for 2022, asked if Parker Kligerman has any updates for silly season. And he basically confirmed that he's expected to only do 8 to 10 or 12 races with Henderson Motorsports in 2022 in the number 75 truck once again. Parker Kligerman has basically done this for the last couple years. I think really since about 2015 and 2016, when he hasn't really had a full-time ride in NASCAR. He's been also working as an NBC reporter, but for the last years, he has been competing part-time with Henderson Motorsports. He got a win with them in 2017 and has been really impressive with the Henderson Motorsports group. He's competed for top 10s and top 5s in points. Some points, unfortunately, he's crashed out, but when he's competing for Henderson Motorsports, he has been really, really strong. And I know, like I said, he only runs part-time for the team right now, but I think that he is going to be a threat in some of these races next year, especially with how good the 75 truck team can be, where they could be in top 5s and top 10s. I think he's got a really, really good shot. And he also, remember earlier this year, he got some Cup experience and finished in the top 20 and was running in the top 15 with Gaunt Brothers racing equipment, which is insanely impressive considering he's not been in the Cup Series for 2 years at that point. He got into a Cup car and finished in the top 20. He finished in the top 20 in the race, I think maybe one lap down. But he did so well in that race, and I'm really glad to see he's coming back and running next year. I know it's only on a part-time status for 2022. I know it's only part-time, but I think it's really, really cool to see that at least he's going to be coming back next year. I'm very, very happy for him, and, it's good to see that he will be back next year to at least get an opportunity continue racing in 2022, and I'm glad to see that he'll be running for Henderson Motorsports in 2022, and good luck to him heading into 2022. Now we're going to head on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bailey Currey. As it was announced this Monday that Bailey Currey is going to be driving for JD Motorsports full-time in 2022. Now, at this moment, the number and everything else has not been announced. There have been speculation maybe he was going to be going into the 4-car JD Motorsports in 2022, but the number has not been confirmed for him going into 2022. This does not surprise me one bit. I said this last week that most likely he was going to be the driver that was going to be going to JD Motorsports in 2022, just because he did extremely well with JD Motorsports last year. He was really, really impressive last year, and he had that little pen emoji they basically put on his Twitter, and then I did my contest clues, and I thought it's probably going to be Bailey Currey gets in a ride, and I'm absolutely was right on that. And first of all, I am extremely happy that Bailey Currey is going to be getting into this ride next year. I think he absolutely deserves it. I know this is not much of an upgrade from the Mike Harmon Racing Group, but let's see, for the Mike Harmon cars were not really that fast, and he would, at points, just wheel the thing out of his cars. He would run for top 25s and top 20s in Mike Harmon Racing equipment, and kind of helped Mike Harmon Racing become from like a back burner team a little bit, even though they had a lot of electrical problems this year with their cars. He got their cars a lot better. And then he goes to JD Motorsports this past year, and holy crap, he runs top 15 and top 20. And besides really Landon Castle, and this is no disrespect to a lot of other drivers' teams, I like all the other drivers at the team, but he was really performing extremely well in that 15 car, running in top 15 and top 20. So he absolutely deserves this opportunity. And I think he's going to really make best out of it. I don't think he's going to contend for a championship next year. I don't expect that for him next year. But I think he's going to be somewhat of a threat to contend for top 15s and top 20s. I think top 50s and top 20s are what his goal should be for next year. I know those are really high expectations, especially for how much JD Motorsports really fell off, because let's be for real, JD Motorsports has absolutely struggled over the last 2 years. But I think he's going to surprise a lot of people in 2022. I think he's a great driver, does a lot of good stuff, and I think he's going to do really, really great in 2022. I think he could be an underdog to make the playoffs if luck comes his way. I think JD Motorsports will do really good to help him out next year. The big question right now is what happens to all the other drivers of the team. I think Ryan Vargas is going to be back with the team next year. Ryan has said that his plans are going to be announced really, really soon here in the coming weeks, and I think there will be a couple other drivers that potentially could go. I think JD Motorsports, they need to downsize next year, but regardless, I'm very happy to see that Bailey Curry's going back to JD Motorsports next year. I think it's a great pickup, a great decision. He's on really good and underfunded equipment, and he's going to have a little bit better equipment to show what he's capable of. Like I said, I know JD Motorsports is not the best team out there, but at the same time, I think it's good to see that he's going to have a team to go to next year that can help him out and get through those kinks, and hopefully he can help their team develop a little more and can do well enough to contend in 2022, because I'd like to see him have an opportunity to contend a little bit more than he did in 2021. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode. As it was announced this morning that LGB Coin is going to sponsor Brandon Brown for the full 2022 season. Adam Stern also reported that Brandon Brown has been hesitant to embrace the phrase, but is also in need in sponsorship for 2022. And the company also said that they're trying to make this turn into more of a positive light, and they're basically saying, "Let's go America," instead of saying, "Let's go Brandon." Now, for the record, I'm not a fan of the chant. I've been really adamantly against the chant because, unfortunately, with the issues of sponsorship. But if Brandon Brown is going to embrace it, so be it. We have to support it, and it is what it is. Let me say this one thing. I know a lot of people are not happy about the car. I know a lot of people are not people. And there's a couple reasons why I think a lot of people are not happy. Number one, because he basically said about a week ago they've been struggling for sponsorship and really didn't want sympathy through that. And also said that a lot of people are not a fan of the crypto and the NFTs as well. Let me tell you something. Brandon Brown did not really have a choice when it came to the sponsorship. He had to take it. And the fact that they're going to sponsor for the whole season, I think is really good. He had no choice. He basically was either take this sponsorship or basically not have any sponsorship at all, and potentially his career was basically going to go up in ruins because of the chant. He really didn't have a choice because the sponsors that were talking to him, he talked about this last week, the sponsor of Larry's Lemonade, they basically are planning to drop him, and they're not sponsoring him anymore in 2022. So he had to basically take the sponsorship for all the races, and fair play to this company. They're going to sponsor him for all races. We'll talk about a little bit of suspicion around this company in a second, but I think it's good to see that he's going to have full sponsorship. Now, the big question is in regards to Let's Go Brandon and the LGB coin. Does this company survive the whole season? Because let's look at the followers. They have 1,000 followers, and they really are not a company that we've ever seen before. And I don't entirely trust this company. They're going to sponsor him for the whole season, which is something I'm a little bit worried about. Don't get me wrong. I'm very happy that he has full season sponsorship. But especially for a company that we've really never heard about, it is a little fishy. Again, if they survive the whole season and the checks clear and checks and all that stuff clear, I think it's a good thing that he will have funding. But the big question is, do the checks clear? If they do, it's really, really good. He's going to be fully funded. You don't see companies fully fund drivers anymore in the NASCAR. Even in the Cup Series, there's not a full season sponsor anymore in the NASCAR Cup Series anymore. You don't really have that anymore. So it's good to see at least, well, besides HenderCars.com, even though they don't sponsor, they're pretty sponsor for the whole season. But you don't really see full season sponsors much anymore. So it's good to see that a company is willing to step up to the plate, and they're likely going to sponsor Brandon Brown in 2022, even if it is a company that is very, very controversial and has caused a lot of controversy. I think it's good to see that a sponsor is coming in. I think the paint scheme looks pretty good, by the way, too. But I know it's very controversial, and I know a lot of people are not fans overall of the LGB coin because of the fact of the Let's Go Brandon chant. But I don't think people need to turn their heads on Brandon Brown. He really didn't have an option. He really didn't have a choice. He had to take it. And I expect people in NASCAR will probably invest into it. Even people that have already supported the LGBT chant. People will not LGBT chant. The LGBT chant probably will support it. I think, again, I'm not overall the biggest fan of it, but it is what it is, and he's got to do what he's got to do, and I'm at least really happy to see that he's got full funding for 2022 if the check's clear. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jimmie Johnson. As it was announced a couple days ago on Tuesday that Jimmie Johnson is going to compete in all 4 IMSA Michelin Endurance races in 2022. He will return to the 48 for Action Express Racing in 2022. And he's going to have pretty much the same teammate lineup he had next year besides one addition. He will once again have former F1 driver and winner of multiple IMSA races, Kamui Kobayashi, 3-time DTM champion Mike Rockenfeller, and 4-time WTCC champion Jose Maria Lopez. This combination is a very, very strong combination, by the way. I think you got a really, really strong lineup. And it's really cool to see that Jimmie Johnson is coming back to IMSA. The 4 races this car will run, I believe, are the 24 hours of Daytona, the 12 hours of Sebring, the 6 hours at the Glen, and the Petit Le Mans, which is the 10 hours at Road Atlanta, the Petit Le Mans. First of all, like I said, very excited to see that Jimmie Johnson is coming back to IMSA and running all 4 races. He did this last year as well and had some pretty decent runs. This team did not win any races in 2021, but I think that they were pretty fast and pretty big contenders. The biggest question is, can Jimmie Johnson keep up the pace, or is he going to get carried next year? That's the big question right now. But I do think that this line, and another thing that I forgot to mention, this is also Hendrick supported as well. Hendrick is backing him up, so Hendrick still has a little bit of backing and support behind Jimmie Johnson and still associated with Chevy, which is really, really interesting. Series runner with Chip Ganassi, which is a Honda branding. But talking about all 4 drivers, you got guys who are really, really strong, drivers that are very, very competitive. And the biggest question is, can Jimmie Johnson keep up? That's going to be the big determination. However, I think this team is really, really exciting for next year. And I think having another year, Jimmie Johnson having another year in this series, I think he's only going to get better next year. I think he's going to be very, very competitive in 2022 and show a lot more pace. I still think that Kamui Kobayashi is probably going to be the guy who really holds this team together and be the best performer of the team. I do also think Jose Maria Lopez, though, a lot of people probably have not heard of him unless you watch the World Endurance Championship. Jose Maria Lopez is someone that I think is really going to help, is going to be another person that will be a big portion part of this team. And I think that he could be the person and the key person that really helped this team. Another question probably a lot of people are having is, where is Simon Pagenaud? Because Simon Pagenaud drove this car last year. Simon Pagenaud is going to be with Meyer-Shank, and I believe he'll be running the IMSA races with them as well next year. And for sure, I think the 24 hours of Daytona, he's going to run that event as well. So there's a lot of questions about that. I think he's going to run the 24 hours Daytona as well with Meyer-Shank Racing. So that's a big question a lot of people have. He's running a Meyer-Shank next year. But I think it's really, really exciting that Jimmie Johnson and all these drivers are coming back. And I think it's great to see they have a car that's coming back next year that has a really, really strong shot, overall, in my opinion, of being really, really competitive. So good luck to this team next year. I hope they do very, very well, because I think the fact that they are coming back next year is great for the IMSA and great for the sport. And I'm glad to see that they are returning in 2022. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Josh Bilicki. Now, it was reported yesterday by Toby Christie and TobyChristie.com that according to sources, Josh Bilicki will not likely be returning to Rick Ware Racing in 2022. They mentioned that this announcement likely is going to come in early January, that he will not be returning to the team in 2022. And according to the article that I read, he apparently is a likely candidate for the Spire 77 car in 2022. And like I mentioned, there's an announcement coming for this in regards to this announcement in early January. In probably the first or second week of January, we're going to hear this. First of all, I'm very shocked that he's not going to be back at Rick Ware Racing, because I had speculated, I think yesterday for the Daytona 500 intros, that I thought that Josh Bilicki was going to go to the 15 car in 2022 on a full-time basis because of that sponsorship. I'm shocked that he potentially could go to the 77 car, but if he's going to the 77 car next year, that, in my opinion, is a really, really good move. I think Josh Bilicki is a very, very solid racer. A driver I think is really criminally underrated, just because of the fact that he's been with Rick Ware Racing. And let's be for real, Rick Ware Racing, they're not a very, very strong team. They're not a team that has really shown a lot of pace and has not shown a lot of promise about contending for wins. At least of yet, they might be able to next year with the SHR partnership. But I'm not, it is what it is in that front in regards to that. So I'm a little shocked, though, that he's not coming back to Rick Ware Racing next year. Also, 77 car for Spire Motorsports. Like I said, I think he will be a driver at Spire Motorsports that I think will be very, very surprising. I think he's a driver that will contend a little bit and will help that 77 car. And I think them having just two drivers to focus on instead of having multiple drivers in the 77 car, even though Justin Hilly, to be fair, ran most of the season, the fact that they basically are going to choose Josh Bilicki is definitely really, really interesting. But I think them having to focus on both those drivers is really, really going to help their team. It also, to me, makes a lot more sense to make this move because there's really, other than that, what full-time rides are available? You got the Rick Ware cars and you have the Spire cars. That's really all you have in regards to that. So if he's going to Spire, I think he'll be solid next year. I think he'll be a pretty decent contender 2022, and I think he'll show a lot of pace next year. I think he's going to be a driver that could contend for maybe some top 15s and top 20s, impress on the road courses for sure, considering he's really good on road courses. I remember in 2015, he drove for, I think it was BJ McLeod's team in 2015 when they were kind of starting up around 2015. He ended up running, I think, leading 10 laps in that race and was really, really impressive. So he's not a driver that's a slouch. He's a guy who knows how to get it done and also has raced in IMSA too in the past, not to mention, who has a lot of that racing experience as well. And a driver that's been pretty decent, not to mention, on super speedways as well. And I think he'll be pretty good next year. What are my expectations for Josh Bilicki if he goes to the 77 for Spire Motorsports? Some top 10, maybe one occasional top 10 at one point. But I think that Spire Motorsports will improve their whole arsenal in 2022, especially Josh Bilicki, who is a very criminally underrated driver. But the other big question is, who goes to Rick Ware Racing now? Who ends up going to Rick Ware Racing if Josh Bilicki is not going there? Well, I think Cody Ware is going to go to the 51 car. I think Cody Ware is going to be running full-time at IndyCar, not IndyCar. He's going to run full-time in the Cup Series next year. Cody Ware no longer, as basically said, according to what David Land said a couple days ago on his channel, he basically said that Cody Ware apparently does not want to focus on IndyCar or IMSA right now. He kind of want to just focus on the NASCAR Cup Series. So I think Cody Ware is going to go full-time for one of those cars, even if a lot of people don't agree with that. I think he's going to go full-time in one of those cars. The other driver that I think is going to be in the drive full times, I don't think they're going to have a lead part-time car unless you have a part-time car next year with multiple drivers and one car that they do run with multiple drivers. I think if they're going to choose someone else to run full-time, I think you're going to go with James Davison. James Davison has ran for this team in the past, and I think James Davison is a very, very awesome and very underrated driver. And I think that if Rick Ware potentially improving their equipment next year, I think James Davison could be an underdog to show some stuff next year. So I think if they don't go with multiple drivers in one of their cars, I think they go with James Davison, and I think they go with Cody Ware in 2022. They've driven for the Rick Ware Racing Group in the past. James Davison drove for them in 2021 and did some pretty decent runs with them. So I think that they're going to choose somebody that should be James Davison, and I think they're going to go with Cody Ware just because Cody Ware is the son of Rick Ware. The other big question is, what happens to the other drivers that were potentially going to go to that 77 car next year? Because there were 3 other candidates that I know have been mentioned in the past about the 77 car. First one being Ryan Preece, the other one being Kaz Grala, and finally Matt DiBenedetto. First, let's get Matt DiBenedetto out of the way. Matt DiBenedetto, I'm honestly not sure what's going to happen with Matt DiBenedetto after 2020, after this year. Because Matt DiBenedetto, after the whole situation earlier this year in November, where basically there have been rumors he was going to lose his, basically not even going to race the season finale with the Wood Brothers and basically cancel his sponsorship things and where his fan meetups and stuff, they basically canceled that. He has not been in a ride, and we don't know what's going on with Matt DiBenedetto. I think Matt DiBenedetto is not a likely candidate to go to the set. He's not really a likely candidate to go full-time right now because he doesn't have funding. And funding matters a ton. If you don't have sponsorship to back you up, you're not going to be in a good position to have a ride next year. So I do not think that Matt DiBenedetto really is going to have a full-time ride unless he goes to Rick Ware Racing if they decide to go with him. If he doesn't go to Rick Ware Racing Cup, I think he's out of the sport, really out of the sport on a full-time basis, but he still can end up part-time in 2022. Next driver, Kaz Grala. Now, Kaz Grala, I think, actually has a potential ride he could go to next year, and there have been some rumors speculating about Kaz Grala potentially going to one of the Young's Motorsports trucks in 2022. There have been some racing forums that have been talking about this, and there have been some rumors rumbling around the garage that Kaz Grala could go to Young's Motorsports in 2022. Kaz Grala actually has driven for Young's Motorsports in the past. He actually drove for them, I think, at Circuit of the Americas, I think, and also at Daytona Road Course. Had some pretty decent runs with the team this past year. I think he ended up finishing in the top 5 at COTA and led laps at COTA for Young's Motorsports, a team that has not shown a ton of pace. But I think he will do really well for Young's Motorsports, especially on the road course if he ends up going there. There's also a possibility he can go to another team next year if that is available. But I think he's a favorite to go to one of the Young's Motorsports trucks in 2022. And finally, Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece, I think, has one place where I think he's going to next year, and I think it's going to be Sam Hunt Racing. Ryan Preece has said recently that he has an announcement that's coming very, very soon, very, very shortly. We talked about this last Thursday on the channel, and I think that Ryan Preece will end up at Sam Hunt Racing because they also are teasing their plans, and I think those announcements are going to be coming in early January as well. So I think that Ryan Preece, he's going to be going there at Sam Hunt Racing in 2022. And those are the big 3 drivers that kind of were potentially in the ride for 77 for Spire, but they most likely are not going there anymore. As for Josh Bilicki, again, I'm very excited to see what he can do next year. I hope he does really, really great. And I hope he ends up at Spire. I hope he does because, again, if he goes to Spire, I think he has some pretty solid runs. He's also got sponsorship funding. I think that sponsor that we talked about yesterday with Daytona 500 Interest, I think they would probably come over with them to help him out next year. So Good luck to Josh Bilicki next year, and if it does come true, I think he'll do really great at Spire Motorsports next year. So, anyway, that is it for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on Speed Notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links scheduled below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your expectations for Josh Bilicki if he ends up at Spire Motorsports? Do you think he ends up doing really well, or do you think he struggles in 2022? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts on all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. I've got one more video that's going to be dropping for the end of the year before we officially get into 2022. I'm really excited what I got for coming in 2022. I cannot wait to share it with you guys. But anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.